People fear being alone, especially as they age. But let me ask you this, when was the last time you truly enjoyed your own company? When I turned 70, I made a decision. I would stop chasing social interactions that didn't serve me, stop entertaining conversations that drained me, and start embracing solitude instead. And the result? A life of peace, clarity, and deep fulfillment. You reach a certain age, and the world starts to feel different. No, not just because of time passing, not just because of technology or trends shifting. It's something deeper, something internal. It's the realization that noise, chatter, and constant company don't hold the same appeal they once did. You start to notice that silence isn't empty. It's full. Solitude isn't loneliness. It's peace. And that's why, at 70, I avoid people. Now, before you misunderstand, let me be clear. I don't hate people. I don't think less of them. I've just come to value my own space, my own thoughts, and my own company in ways I never did before. It's not a rejection of the world. It's an embrace of something richer, something quieter, something deeply fulfilling. There was a time when my days were filled with people. Family, friends, colleagues, acquaintances, always someone to talk to, somewhere to be, something to do. And it was good. It was lively. It was necessary at that stage in life. But now I choose differently. I choose the slow morning with a cup of tea, the walk where the only sounds are the birds and the rustling trees, the evening where I sit with my thoughts instead of filling them with idle conversation. And let me tell you, it's not loneliness. It's a kind of freedom. People often fear being alone because they don't know how to be alone. They think silence is scary because they've never truly listened to it. I used to be like that too. I'd reach for the phone, turn on the TV, find someone to talk to, just so I wouldn't feel the weight of quiet. But over time, I learned that silence is not a void. It's a mirror. And if you've lived long enough, if you've seen enough, done enough, and experienced enough, you realize that there's so much wisdom waiting for you in that quiet space. See, the older you get, the more you start to notice things about people. You see the patterns, the cycles, the way conversations loop and repeat themselves. You hear the same complaints, the same gossip, the same worries about things that, in the grand scheme of life, don't matter as much as people think they do. You realize how much of social interaction is just noise, how much of it is just people trying to fill their own emptiness, their own uncertainty, with words. And so, you begin to step back. Not because you don't care, but because you've learned to care differently. When you're younger, you feel an obligation to engage, to be present, to maintain relationships even when they drain you. You feel a sense of duty to be social, to be available, to be part of the constant hum of life. But then, somewhere along the way, you realize that true connection doesn't require constant presence. True peace doesn't come from endless socializing, and true wisdom often comes in the quiet moments when you're alone, reflecting, rather than in a crowded room full of empty chatter. I've had friends who didn't understand my shift. "Why don't you come around as much?" they'd ask. "Why don't you call as often?" And I'd tell them the truth. It's not that I don't love them. It's not that I don't cherish the memories we've shared. It's just that I've found something else, something deeper, something that brings me more peace than a room full of voices ever could. Solitude teaches you things that socializing never will. It teaches you the value of your own thoughts, the depth of your own emotions, the richness of your own experiences. It allows you to process life in a way that constant company never does. When you're always surrounded by people, your mind is filled with external voices. But when you're alone, you get to hear your own voice, the one that often gets drowned out in the noise of the world. Now, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy the right company, at the right time, in the right way. A deep conversation with an old friend, a quiet moment shared with someone who understands the beauty of silence, a meaningful exchange that goes beyond the surface. That I still appreciate. but mindless small talk, endless social obligations, the need to be constantly plugged into other people's lives? No, I don't need that anymore. Some might say, but isn't life about relationships? And to that, I say, yes, but not just relationships with others. Life is also about your relationship with yourself. And if you spend your whole life focused on external connections, you might never truly develop the most important connection of all, the one with your own soul. There's something beautiful about being alone and content. Not the kind of alone that comes from rejection, not the kind of solitude that feels forced, but the kind that you choose. The kind that feels like a gift rather than a punishment. The kind where you wake up and realize that you don't need to be surrounded by people to feel whole. I've learned that the world moves fast, but I don't have to keep up. I've learned that people come and go, but the relationship I have with myself is permanent. And I've learned that silence, rather than being something to fear, is something to embrace. So, at 70, I avoid people. Not because I don't care, but because I care deeply about the right things. I choose my peace over obligation. I choose solitude over noise. And in doing so, I found something that many spend their whole lives searching for: contentment. When you reach a certain stage in life, you start to realize that the world around you has been running on a different rhythm than your own. People are caught up in the rush, always looking for the next thing, next conversation, next plan, next event, next distraction. But when you step away from it all, when you sit quietly with yourself, you start to wonder, what's the hurry? Where is everyone really going? And more importantly, what are they running from? I see it all the time. People my age clinging to social circles that exhaust them, afraid to let go because they think solitude means they've been forgotten. Younger folks constantly glued to their screens, scrolling through conversations that don't really mean anything. Everyone's so desperate to be connected that they never stop to ask if the connections actually bring them peace. But here's what I've learned. Peace isn't found in the company of others. It's found in the moments you don't need anything from anyone. It's found in being able to sit alone with your own thoughts and not feel uneasy. You see, I wasn't always like this. There was a time when I thought solitude meant something was missing, that if I wasn't surrounded by people, I was somehow failing at life. So I kept myself busy, always something to do, someone to meet, somewhere to go. And for a while, it worked. But then life did what life always does. It started stripping things away. People moved on. Some friendships faded. Loved ones passed. The constant busyness slowed, whether I wanted it to or not. And in that slowing down, I had a choice. Cling to the past and try to keep up with a life that no longer fit me, or embrace the quiet and see what it had to offer. And let me tell you, the quiet had more to offer than I ever imagined. You start noticing things when you're alone. Not just the world around you, but the world inside you. The thoughts you never gave yourself time to process. The emotions you never fully acknowledged. The wisdom you've gathered over decades, but never sat still long enough to truly absorb. It all starts surfacing, and that's when you realize, this is what solitude is really about. It's not about shutting people out. It's not about being bitter or withdrawn. It's about finally giving yourself the space to understand your own life, to sit with your own truth, to appreciate your own presence. I think a lot of people avoid solitude because they're afraid of what they'll find when they're alone. They're afraid they won't like their own company. They're afraid of regrets catching up to them, of memories resurfacing, of truths they've spent years burying. But here's the thing. Avoiding yourself doesn't make those things go away. It just postpones the moment when you'll have to face them. And at my age, I've learned that postponing doesn't solve anything. So I sit with my memories. I sit with my mistakes. I sit with the things I wish I had done differently, the people I miss, the moments I wish I could relive. And you know what? It doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like closure. It feels like finally making peace with everything that made me who I am. That's why I don't chase people anymore. Not because I don't love them, but because I don't need constant noise to feel whole. I don't need a crowded room to feel like my life has meaning. I don't need to be included in every conversation to feel relevant. I am relevant to myself, and that is enough. I think a lot of younger people won't understand this yet. And that's okay. Life has a way of teaching you things when you're ready. But for those who do understand, for those who feel that pull towards solitude but are afraid to embrace it, let me tell you, there is nothing to fear. There is nothing missing. There is nothing wrong with choosing yourself over the demands of the world. Some people will take it personally. They'll think you're pushing them away. They'll assume you're lonely or depressed. But that's only because they haven't discovered what you have. They don't yet know the joy of a quiet morning with no obligations. They don't yet know the peace of sitting alone with your thoughts and feeling content. They don't yet know that solitude isn't about isolation, it's about freedom. And so, I let them think what they want. I don't argue. I don't explain myself. I don't feel the need to justify my choices. Because the thing about solitude is, once you embrace it, you stop seeking validation for it. You simply live. And in that living, you find a kind of peace that no conversation, no gathering, no amount of socializing could ever give you. The moment you start embracing solitude, the world looks different. Not in a drastic, earth-shattering way, no. It's more subtle than that. You begin to see things with a clarity that was always there, but you were too distracted to notice. You start realizing how much time people waste on things that don't truly matter. Arguments that lead nowhere. Relationships held together by obligation rather than genuine connection. The endless chase for validation, approval, status, all things that, at the end of the day, don't bring real peace. When I was younger, I used to get caught up in it too. I thought being surrounded by people meant I was doing something right, that the more I engaged, the more meaningful my life was. But now, from where I stand, I see it differently. Now I understand that most of what people chase is nothing more than noise, temporary distractions that keep them from sitting still long enough to ask themselves the important questions. Who am I when no one is around? What truly makes me happy? What have I been avoiding? Solitude forces you to face yourself. And for some, that's the scariest thing of all. But here's what people don't realize. When you stop running from yourself, when you finally sit down, with all the thoughts, emotions, and memories you've been avoiding, something incredible happens. The weight starts lifting. The noise dies down. The things that once felt so important, whether it's what people think of you, whether you're being included, whether you're keeping up with the world, lose their grip on you. And in that space, something else takes root. Peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from things going your way, not the kind of peace that depends on circumstances, but the kind of peace that stays with you no matter what's happening outside of you. A deep, internal peace that doesn't require anything but your own presence. It's funny, really. People spend their whole lives chasing happiness, and yet happiness was never something to be chased. It was something to be uncovered, something already within you, hidden beneath all the distractions and expectations of the world. And you don't find it in a crowd, you find it in solitude. But most people misunderstand solitude. They think it's loneliness. They think avoiding people means you're bitter, or that you've given up on life. They don't see that it's the opposite. It's the fullest embrace of life. It's the realization that you don't need constant engagement to feel alive, that you don't need to be in the center of everything to matter. Some people assume I must be missing out on something by keeping to myself. They think I must long for the days of social gatherings, of busy schedules, of endless conversations. But I don't. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss the meaningless small talk. I don't miss being pulled into things that don't align with who I am anymore. What I have now is something most people don't even realize they need. Room to breathe. Room to think. room to simply exist without having to explain, justify, or perform. There is so much freedom in no longer needing to be understood by others, in realizing that your life doesn't need to be put on display to be meaningful, in knowing that you don't have to prove anything to anyone, not your worth, not your happiness, not your choices. That's the beauty of solitude. It strips away the expectations, the pressures, the distractions, and leaves you with something so simple, so pure, so deeply fulfilling: yourself. I used to think happiness was something external, something to be found in people, in relationships, in achievements. But now I know better. Happiness is being at peace with where you are, who you are, and the life you've built for yourself. It's waking up in the morning and feeling content, not because of what's happening around you, but because of the quiet satisfaction of simply being. I don't avoid people because I'm angry or sad or lost. I avoid people because I've finally found something that brings me more joy than any conversation ever could: silence. A silence that isn't empty, but full of understanding, full of wisdom, full of the kind of clarity that only comes when you stop looking outward for meaning and start looking inward. And that's the real secret of solitude. It doesn't take anything away from you. It gives you everything you didn't know you were missing. People ask me sometimes, "Aren't you afraid of being alone?" And I always smile because I know what they really mean. They're not asking about solitude itself. They're asking if I fear being forgotten, if I worry about fading into the background while the rest of the world moves on without me. And my answer is always the same: I don't fear solitude. I fear wasting what little time I have left on things that don't bring me peace. You see, at my age, you start to look at time differently. You don't count it in years anymore. You count it in quiet mornings, in peaceful afternoons, in evenings that don't feel rushed. You count it in moments of clarity, in deep breaths, in the kind of stillness that makes you realize just how fleeting everything really is. And when you see time this way, you stop spending it carelessly. You stop filling your days with obligations that drain you, with people who don't add to your peace, with conversations that don't nourish your soul. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You stop showing up just because it's expected. You stop giving your energy away to anything or anyone who doesn't truly deserve it. I used to think solitude was something to be endured. Now I know it's something to be embraced. It's not a lack, it's an abundance. It's not loneliness, it's a deep, personal freedom. And I won't trade that for anything. The truth is, we all walk this path alone in the end. No matter how many people surround you, no matter how full your life may seem, the journey inward is one you take by yourself. And the sooner you make peace with that, the sooner you stop fearing solitude and start appreciating it for what it truly is: a gift. There is something powerful about reaching a point in life where you no longer seek validation, no longer need constant companionship, no longer feel the urge to explain yourself. When you can sit alone, truly alone, and feel completely at peace with who you are, that's when you know you've found something most people never will. So, no, I don't avoid people out of bitterness or sadness. I avoid people because I have finally learned that my own company is enough, because I no longer need to fill my time with noise to feel relevant. Because the world, with all its distractions, its expectations, its endless demands, has nothing to offer me that I haven't already found within myself. I choose solitude, not because I'm hiding from life, but because I'm finally, truly living it. And in that stillness, in that quiet, in that sacred space of my own making, I am free. If there's one thing I hope you take from this, it's that solitude is not something to fear, it's something to understand. Life is not about how many people surround you, how often your phone rings, or how full your calendar is. Life is about depth, about meaning, about the quiet satisfaction of knowing who you are when everything else fades away. The world teaches you to seek noise, to stay busy, to constantly engage. But real wisdom is found in the spaces in between. In the moments of stillness, where you hear your own thoughts clearly, where you can reflect on the life you've lived, without distraction, where you realize that your worth was never tied to how many people needed you. People will tell you that being alone is unnatural, that humans are social creatures meant to be surrounded by others at all times. But those same people often fill their lives with shallow connections, afraid to be alone with their own thoughts. They mistake company for closeness, conversation for connection, and in their fear of solitude, they never truly get to know themselves. They spend years pleasing others, meeting expectations, doing what they think they should do, only to wake up one day and wonder where the time went and whether they ever truly lived for themselves. So if you ever feel the pull towards solitude, don't resist it, lean into it. Give yourself permission to step away from the noise, to sit with your own soul, to discover what it feels like to be at peace without anyone else telling you who you should be. Because in the end, the relationship you have with yourself is the longest one you'll ever have. And when you make peace with that, when you stop running from your own company and start embracing it, you'll find that solitude was never emptiness. It was wholeness all along.